Hey fourth grade, welcome to fourth grade social studies. So, the last time we read in our social studies book, it was quite a long time ago, but when we did, we were talking about homesteading. And what homesteading was, if you'll remember, is when the United States was accumulating or gathering more land for the whole of the United States. All right, so we had new states that were being added on as we were getting more land, and people were moving from the large, crowded areas of places like New York, from the East Coast, and they were going towards the West Coast, towards Arizona and California, because, as you'll remember, they had land out there that was free. And you could go and you could set up stakes and you could improve the land, and in 5 years that land would belong to you. All right, so that is where we left off. But now we are moving on to the Great War. All right, so the Great War starts on page 182 in your textbook, so go ahead and go there if you're not already there. So, our heading says, the world goes to war. All right, so let's read this together. Follow along as I read aloud. In the early 1900s, most Americans were focused on daily life, progress, and the change in their own country. Woodrow Wilson had been elected president in 1912. Business in America was good. Many people had worked hard to improve their lives. Most Americans had a job and enough to eat. Life in America was not perfect, but for most it was peaceful and prosperous. However, trouble was brewing in other parts of the world. People in Europe had strong feelings of pride in their countries. Nations were hungry for more power. They wanted to expand and become empires. Some countries had built powerful armies and navies. Unrest between nations was beginning to develop. Choices in other countries would soon affect all Americans and all the world. Europe's dominoes. Several countries in Europe had made alliances, and an alliance is an agreement between nations to help fight each other's battles. Great Britain, France, and Russia had made one of these alliances. It was called the Triple Entity. All right, so that is Great Britain, France, and Russia, the Triple Entity. Then Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy had formed another alliance, and theirs was the Triple Alliance. Okay, so we've got the Triple Entity and the Triple Alliance. These alliances, or groups that were going to stick together in case they went to war, put Europe in a dangerous situation. If one nation went into an alliance, went into war, the other nations in that alliance would have to join the war as well. So, a member of the Triple Alliance might declare war on a member of the Triple Entity, and a domino effect would suddenly begin. The war would not be between only the two nations. Many nations would be at war with each other. And in 1914, this is exactly what happened. So if you look at that picture right there, that'll give you a little heads up into what we're about to read. Okay? So, turn the page. The war begins. In June of that year, the Austrian Archduke was traveling in Bosnia. Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary. A young man from a terrorist group fired shots into the Archduke's car as it drove by. Both Ferdinand and his wife were killed. So let's look at that picture. Archduke Francis Ferdinand of Austria and his wife, the Archduchess of Hohenberg, I'm not exactly sure how to say that, in 1914, right? So this is just before they were killed. The terrorist group came from the small country of Serbia. Austria-Hungary blamed the country for the killings, and they declared war on Serbia. Now, if you remember, Austria-Hungary was part of an alliance, and so that's going to come into effect here. So let's continue. The country of Russia took Serbia's side, and Russia quickly began moving its army to help Serbia. Because of the alliances, other countries jumped into action. Germany declared war on Russia, and France took Russia's side. Britain had hoped to stay out of the conflict, but the British grew angry when Germany invaded Belgium, a neutral country. So Belgium wanted nothing to do with this, but they were invaded by Germany, and so they had to get involved. And so did the English. Okay, so the English, or the Britons, joined France and Russia in the war. Italy decided to withdraw from the Triple Alliance, and Italy would join forces with Russia, Serbia, France, and Britain the next year. Germany and Austria-Hungary's side was called the Central Powers, and the other countries would soon join them. The Triple Entity countries called themselves the Allies. So we're kind of changing names around here as other people are joining or leaving. Okay, so the Allies are now, or the Triple Entity are now the Allies. They would be joined by others, including eventually the United States. Okay, that's a little bit later. So within weeks, it seemed that the entire world was at war. The war was to last nearly 5 years. At the time of the fighting, people called it the Great War, and it later became known as World War I. Okay, so that is how World War I started. We had these two sides, these several countries that each put an alliance together. It's kind of like when you play tag and you have your allies. So you say, I'm not going to tag you if you're not going to tag me, and then we'll go and get this other person. But they also have an alliance, right? And so they aren't going to tag these other people, but they're all going to join and try and go after you. All right, so those are their alliances, and because they have those alliances, it seemed like the entire world at this point was at war. But it wasn't until later on, a few years later, that it seemed like really the entire world was at war. So the United States hadn't joined at this point in 1914, but eventually they would join the war, and we're going to learn about that a little bit later in our next lesson. All right? See you soon.